Welcome back to Billy's Books. Today we're going to do a relatively new book. It's kind of just came out in the past month or so. It's Hero of Two Worlds by Mike Duncan. It's about the Marquis de Lafayette, who was a hero in two worlds. The New World, as in the American Revolution. He was a big hero of that. You may have a Lafayette Street in your own hometown because everybody loved him. And then after that, he went back to France and participated in the French Revolution, which is a different situation, as you hopefully know. They are not equivalent revolutions. Anyway, so Mike Duncan he's a podcaster. I got into him back when he was doing the podcast called The History of Rome, which went from the early days of the Republic all the way to the fall. That was very interesting, and there he developed a very fine sense of humor and storytelling. And then when he was finished with that, he took on another podcast called Revolutions, which did many great detailed chapters on many revolutions: the English Revolution, the American Revolution, Haitian Revolution, Mexican Revolution, French Revolution, and of course the Russian Revolution. Which is his favorite. But we're going to focus on the American Revolution and the Russian and the French Revolution because that's where Lafayette did his stuff. He was a young rich guy who inherited lots of money. It wasn't the best way to inherit because basically his whole family died on him, and so he was kind of orphaned. But while he was a student, strangely enough, even though they had a very ancien regime, or the very strong, mighty monarchy, they for some reason taught all their students in the middle of the 18th century. They seemed to teach them all ancient Greeks and Romans and their philosophies about democracy. So here's a quote here. It was not lost on observers then or now how crazy it was for this most absolutist of monarchies to require an entire generation of students to steep themselves in the literary, moral, and political virtues of the ancient heroes of Athenian democracy and the Roman Republic. Marquis de Lafayette was one of the many people who ended up in the Revolution with these heightened ideals that they were taught when they were kids. Oh, nobility. Interestingly, while he was a kid and all the other kids were enjoying the classics, Lafayette enjoyed the writers of freedom. When asked as a child to describe the perfect horse, he didn't say, "Oh, it's one with a beautiful mane and rippling muscles or whatever that, or a free spirit." He said he likes the one that throws the rider off its back. Mike Duncan gets philosophical about the Lafayette being a young noble, and he was super duper powerful, but he was still powerless to death. Or also he was also subject to arranged marriages, which he had no part of either. Luckily, his arranged marriage didn't work out because he ended up loving the wife that he was given, which is a nice break and a pleasant surprise that doesn't always happen or is even expected in royalty or nobility. When he finally came of age, he entered Marie Antoinette's court, which is famous for being decadent and frivolous, and he did not fit into that because even though he was a rich guy, he was raised mostly in the country, so when he got to Paris, he was unaccustomed to all the fineries and trivialities that they did, and he was an awkward dancer and stuff like. He was handy and useful, but he wasn't very useful at being useless, and so he didn't fit in very well. He was such a terrible dancer that when he danced with the queen, she laughed at him in his face while he was dancing. So he was not taken very seriously, and he didn't do well in the cutthroat court. He eventually, being mocked so much, he sort of turned inward and became kind of sullen and quiet, which many people interpreted to mean he was dumb or lacking spirit, but in fact he was just smoldering on the inside, and the best was yet to come. In 1775, he heard about the American Revolution that was happening across the river, and he met the Duke of Gloucester, who was the brother of King George III, and out of spite or whatever, the Duke of Gloucester actually supported the American rebels and Lafayette got a kick out of that and made a friendship with him, and also he found himself a noble cause that he'd been looking for all along. He was a young man looking for a noble cause, and he found one. He also, being so ostracized from the nobility, he decided he'd go respectable and join the military, and he became an officer because he was noble. But then, just when he turned 18, he got to be a captain. But then, around the same time, due to all the problems with the money and the crumbling kingdom of France, that they did some serious cutbacks, and they got a new guy to cut the chaff out of the army, and the chaff usually meant all the nobles that didn't do squat, but took up all the officer positions. So all that nobility was cut away because they were bogus and unskilled and not even motivated. And he unfortunately got pulled with that, even though he was motivated. So he had to scramble his way back for that. So he wasn't officially. He ended up being on the reserves, which is just not cool. He really wanted to join the American cause, so he might actually just sneak away. During this time, because he was even though he was only 18 years old, he was the head of his family, what was left of it, and he changed the family motto from "Determination is enough to overcome any obstacle" to "Why not?" They actually changed their seal to "Why not." Eventually, because of diplomacy with England, France forbade any French officers from joining the rebellion in the New World, and he decided to do it anyway. He bought a ship, La Victoire, and prepared to take it across the ocean to join. It took a while to do that, but he made his plans. He eventually left France without telling his family. He sort of sent on the coast just before he was about to leave across the ocean. He sent them a letter. Of course, this upset his wife terribly because she was carrying a baby in one arm and was pregnant with another when he left. So he wasn't the most responsible husband and or father at that point. But he had his noble cause, so he went across the ocean. And once he got over there and joined George Washington and made a hero of himself in the Battle of Brandywine, suddenly he was a hero again. And when he finally got back a few years later, he was treated like a hero, which is more his style, because Lafayette was cool and he was ambitious, but he was also very vain. He was known for really appreciating being appreciated. Here's a quote having to do with America and France allying. When Benjamin Franklin was presented to the king to celebrate the new accord, he mustered the full depths of his ingratiating charms and said, "If all monarchies were governed by the principles which are in your heart, sire, republics would never be formed." He spoke these words almost exactly 15 years before the first French Republic chopped off Louis's head. So that's the perspective that he provides here. Mike Duncan does a lot of quotes. He gets philosophical himself. They wanted the same things. And this is the philosophical part. If this means they were using each other, then every friendship, attachment, and association in human history can be reduced to raw calculation of self-interest. But that's not how humans work. Divining cynical motives in others often makes us feel we are revealing hard truth. But, as often as not, the bleak reductivism distorts as much as it clarifies. In 1780, during the war, Benedict Arnold, he was a darling of George Washington, was finally found to have betrayed them, and Lafayette was with Washington and Lawrence and Hamilton when at Benedict Arnold's house up the Hudson River when that happened, and he was unhappy. They were all very unhappy about Benedict Arnold betraying them, and George Washington was actually at tears. And later on, Benedict Arnold's assistant was, he was in on it and lied to them on Benedict Arnold's behalf, and instead of getting shot, like officers normally do, George Washington had his assistant hung like a dirty peasant in front of the men to show what betrayal gets you. After the war, Lafayette became an abolitionist, which is one of the reasons I think he's lauded. He became an abolitionist, and he even, from France, wrote back to George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and the other Virginians and said, hey, the war's over. Let's get those principles in motion and get rid of those slaves, which, of course, all three of those Virginians gone presidents were like, oh, I don't know, maybe not the right time for that. No, I'll have to put that one off for a little while, and all that. And yes, Marquis de Lafayette said, your abolitionism is such a testament to your true spirit of freedom. And they pat him on his head and don't do anything about it because they have to keep their money. Lafayette was very prominent in saying, we got to tax the rich, and of course, having been the hero of the American Revolution and gone up and everything, his reputation went right back into the dirt again with the Queen and other nobility for supporting such a terrible thing like rich paying their own way. This is a great book filled with all of Mike Duncan's enthusiasm and witticisms. He does have a way of telling a story that just keeps rolling and stuff. He throws in his humor in there. His humor is different on the podcast than in the book. It's slightly more formal in the book, but it still gets through if you're paying attention. So I recommend this book highly. It's very entertaining and really informative and detailed and really paints a really good picture. If you can't do, review.